Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Here is an example of why Americans are so ill-informed. I mean, first of all, it seemed to me like Jonathan Karl was not prepared for this interview. He came to ask about bump stocks, and what Senator Tim Scott came to do was to lie to the American people. And in Jonathan Karl's single focus on bump stock and not seeing how Tim Scott came on to This Week to completely take over the program and use them as a platform to lie and mislead Americans, it is a complete malpractice. It is journalistic malpractice, what we're going to see here. Check this part out, and then we'll take it on the other side.
I want to start with the Supreme Court's decision on Friday, overturning an executive action by President Trump to ban bump stocks after they were used in what was and still remains the deadliest mass shooting in American history. Were you satisfied with that? Any concerns about that decision?
John, it's simply this. We trust and believe and respect the decision of the Supreme Court. What we need to focus on, John, is the violence that we're seeing across this nation. Under Joe Biden, we've seen the greatest increase in violent crime in my lifetime. And so focusing on ways for us to reduce that crime means getting 4 more years of Donald Trump. Under Donald Trump, we actually respected law enforcement. Under Joe Biden, we've seen the movement to defund the police, leaving communities like the one I grew up in devastated and ravaged by a wave of violent crime that we have not seen literally in 5 decades.
Actually, Senator, as you probably know, the latest stats on violent crime and on the murder rate, they're actually down this past year. But let me get back to my question about the Supreme Court's decision.
Well, let's take a look at those. Let's take a look at those crime rates. We've seen over 4,000 shootings just in the city of Chicago. We've seen a spike in violent crime. It's nice to see something plateau, but the fact of the matter is simple. Under Joe Biden, neighborhoods like the ones I grew up in have never been ravaged.
But back
like
to
the one that raised me are trapped in their houses from the time the sun goes down until it comes up again.
So to my question, though, on bump stocks, would you now favor a Congress acting to ban bump stocks? You had said after that shooting in Las Vegas that if the vote came up, it would sail through Congress. So are you in favor of that ban right now?
Well, I'm strongly in support of the Second Amendment, but what we're going to do in the party, and
I asked about the ban on bump stocks, not the Second Amendment.
We're going to focus on the priorities of the American people. And what the priorities of the American people are today is to focus on closing our southern border. Under Donald Trump, we had a precipitous drop in illegal border crossings. Under Donald Trump, under Joe Biden, we've seen an explosion. 10 million illegal immigrants have invaded our country, leading to migrant crime that we just saw just yesterday.
Okay.
A mother of 5 killed by an illegal immigrant. So what the focus will be is on the safety of the American people. That starts with focusing on our southern border.
Okay, so you're not going to answer that question?
Jonathan Karl, correctly, he did the right thing, right? Tim Scott lied about the crime rate going up. In fact, it was such a big lie to say, this was the biggest crime that we've seen in my lifetime. Complete lie. Not only hyperbole, it was just a lie. Jonathan Karl came back and said, no, sir, I'm sure you know that the crime rate is down. And it's not down a little. It is down a lot. That we get these crime scenes in major media markets that explode them relative to what's really happening in the country. That's on the media who's misrepresenting what is really happening. But Jonathan Karl made that correction as he should. But then what did Tim Scott do? Tim Scott went ahead and moved from crime rates being high to then personalizing different communities that may see violence in their communities. And Karl let that stand. He let him reframe the debate, as opposed to saying, well, those crimes are occurring because of policies that Republicans refuse to pass that would prevent those types of crimes in your communities. Isn't that right? I mean, there was so much that Jonathan Karl could do there to go ahead and force Tim Scott into not lying to the American people, because when he has to answer specifics, at that point in time, he has to do something else. And let me give an example of how Tim Scott had to change the subject and would have had to do the same when he was hit appropriately. When Jonathan Karl said, well, I am still, what I really want to know about is bump stocks. And he kind of centralized him on bump stocks again. And Tim Scott switched the argument about, I support the Second Amendment. We really need to talk about things that the American people are concerned about, and then he immediately jumps to immigration. And Karl's retort was simply, I guess you're not going to answer the question, and then allowed Tim Scott to go ahead and change the subject and make the case. It seemed like Tim Scott came there to interview John Karl and tell John Karl what he wanted on that in that segment. But let's continue.
Let me get to Donald Trump's visit to Capitol Hill. I want to ask you about a few of the policies he spoke at in the meeting with the House Republicans and with the Senate Republicans. During the meeting with House Republicans, he declared that he, quote, loves tariffs. I'm just wondering, do you, I know you've been a free trader for as long as I've known you. Do you love tariffs now?
Listen, one of the things that we have to do is recognize that we should focus on free trade, but free trade requires a fair competition. When you have China literally lying, cheating, and stealing our intellectual property, yes, tariffs create headwinds that actually levels the playing field. But more importantly, what we need is a president who understands how to fix our broken economy today. And Donald Trump led us to the strongest economy we've seen in the last 50 years. So it started with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that lowered rates and made us more globally competitive.
So let me ask you about,
absolutely steals our intellectual property, and that's devastating. We have to have headwinds.
So let me ask you about one of the specific policy ideas he floated while he was in Washington. He floated the idea of raising tariffs high enough to be able to eliminate all of the income that comes in from income taxes. Is that, I mean, by some calculations, that's a 70% across the board tax on everything imported in the country. Some other estimates, it's nearly 100%. Would you favor a policy like that, replacing the income tax with a massive new tariffs on everything coming into the country?
John, I wasn't in that House meeting. I was in the Senate meeting. But what I can tell you spoke about during the time of the Senate is actually exempting taxation on tips. The working class coalition that is now supporting Donald Trump is supporting Donald Trump because they know, looking back over his 4 years, they were better off under Donald Trump. Their wages went up. Their taxes went down. They had more spending power. Under Joe Biden, we've seen the exact opposite. Their wages, frankly, have gone down. Costs have gone up, and they have less spending power. And so what we talked about during the meeting with President Trump is the importance of focusing on the actual working class. Exempting tips is a great idea, followed by more tax cuts that actually generates more revenue to the Treasury and more money in the pockets of the average family. John, when we did this in 2017, we saw revenues go up to the Treasury in 2018 and 2019 and $4,000 back in the pockets of the average family.
there again, Jonathan Karl allows the Senator Tim Scott to use his platform, the ABC platform, to lie to the American people. Donald Trump had the biggest economy in 50 years. Look, it's not like we don't have the data. Even before the pandemic, if you take the pandemic years out of the equation, the Biden economy still outperforms Trump's economy, which was nothing but the extension of Obama's economy. As far as chips and all these other things, it wasn't Donald Trump who got a infrastructure bill that created a whole lot of the type of employment that we have today. That is employment in galore, the biggest, the largest amount of employment ever. It hasn't been Donald Trump who went ahead and dropped the poverty rate. It hasn't been Donald Trump who did any of these things. But you hear Tim Scott comes on and make these statements, and then we have Jonathan Karl in his tunnel vision in which he's doing this interview, not saying, oh, that's not true. Donald Trump accumulated $7 to $8 trillion in debt when he left office. What are you talking about, Tim Scott? One, employment was at its lowest when he left, pandemic or no pandemic. He didn't live on, he was not a great president economically. Secondly, the tax cut he gave for the rich was permanent, and the tax cuts, which were minute, that he gave to the middle class expires. So come on, Tim Scott, or come on, Jonathan Karl. Why is it that we allow these guys to come on TV and simply lie and make believe that things are the way they aren't? And once you don't push back for the truth, the media is not doing its job. If you allow these guys to come on and you don't challenge the lies that they tell, you must be prepared for this thing. I wrote a whole article on this particular economy. And we should have those multimillionaire hosts that are on TV doing the right thing. It's not that difficult. The data is right there for all to see.
So this was Trump's first visit to Capitol Hill since before the attack on January 6th. I want to play something for you that he said just days before he came back to Capitol Hill about those who have been convicted for attacking the Capitol. Take a listen.
J6 warriors, they were warriors, but they were really more than anything else. They're victims of what happened. All they were doing is protesting a rigged election.
So do you buy that the people that came in, beat up Capitol police officers, broke into the building, that they're warriors, or he's also called them hostages, that they're victims? Do you agree with that?
Yeah, anyone who attacks an officer, whether on the Capitol grounds or any place else in the country, should serve time. The question is, for those nonviolent folks who sat outside, who actually simply protested or came into the Capitol because the doors were open, who created no crime, no challenges, those folks today sit in crime in pre-trial. That's a devastation. Some of those have been in pre-trial incarcerated for longer than the sentence attached to that crime. But let me say simply, John, the greatest threat to democracy today is Joe Biden. It started back when he became president. We saw a botched Afghanistan withdrawal where 13 Americans lost their lives. We've seen a wide open, insecure, unsafe southern border with sleeper cells likely in our country, over 100,000 Chinese nationals crossing our southern border, men from Yemen, Iraq, and Afghanistan now populating our country, part of the 10 million illegal immigrant invasion.
Okay, Senator, the day before that violent mob attacked the Capitol, you put out a statement explaining your decision to certify Joe Biden's election victory. Do you stand by that? You were not one of those that challenged the results. You voted to certify Biden's election victory. Do you stand by that?
Certainly. I will stand by that decision and the next decision to certify the fact that Donald Trump will be the next president of the United States. November 5th, the day of reckoning is coming. The early ballots go out in places like North Carolina starting in September. We're going to focus on making sure that we use every tool in the toolkit to make sure that this election results are clear and profound, and that the American people get 4 more years of low unemployment, low inflation, high enthusiasm, and a president respected and sometimes feared on the global stage. That president will be Donald Trump.
All right, and then very quickly, we're just about out of time, but you had said that Mike Pence absolutely did the right thing when he defied Donald Trump's demand to not certify that election. Do you still stand by that Pence absolutely did the right thing on January 6th?
The Constitution is clear. What we're trying to focus on is how do we make sure we get 4 more years where the American people, particularly kids like me, growing up in poverty, have the best future we could possibly have.
Senator Scott, thank
you. Of the American dream.
Senator Scott appeared on This Week with a mission. His mission was to lie to the American people. His mission was to walk over the host. His mission was to completely disregard any statement that the host or question that the host had for him and change that into what he wanted to tell the American people. And you know what Tim Scott did? Tim Scott did a great job of telling the Americans a whole bunch of lies. He got a great job in telling Americans that somehow they were better off under the Trump administration than what we're getting under the Biden administration. Look, what has occurred under Biden is not the best. What had occurred under Trump was actually terrible, even before the pandemic. But we have short Americans in general. The corporatocracy takes advantage of their very short memories that somehow they don't want to feel the pain, the remembrance of what occurred under a pandemic, the difficult lives that we have, the lives that we had that were difficult because of what Trump did. And I tell you, I don't know who the advisors are in Washington for the Democratic Party, Democratic candidates, but we should tell the truth. And the truth is the pandemic worldwide got as bad as it did because American leadership was not there. We had leadership for every single potential pandemic prior to Donald Trump. We didn't get an Ebola epidemic in the United States. We get an H1N1 epidemic in the United States because we mitigated it. And because we mitigated it, you didn't hear about it. You didn't get hundreds of thousands, millions of people dead because we had a president that did his job, her job, to make sure these things didn't happen. Donald Trump failed, and it cost millions of people their lives. So he failed at the pandemic. He failed at having a sound economy. Remember, his economy was built on a tax cut that blew up the budget. And not only did he fail there, he failed on creating a pathway for these people that he's claiming were doing better under him. Let's be clear now. Black unemployment has been better under Biden than under Trump. But I don't even know that is the metric that we need to measure. We need to measure the metric of totality. And when we look at what's in the pipeline, the CHIPS program that's going to bring back manufacturing to the United States for building chips, that brings back a lot of our supply chain that they screwed up. The corporatocracy and Trump's ilk screwed up, bringing that back into the fold. That is what we're talking about. For the American people who are contemplating the potential, the possibility of voting for Donald Trump, be careful what you're doing. Because, look, most people are going to be fine. Most of the people doing what they do are going to be fine. They're going to be telling you just support Trump and things are going to happen. You support Trump at your peril. You support Trump and the lies that he tells because it cannot come to fruition will screw who? The working class. Beware. Manufactured Consent. Manufactured Consent by Joanne Reid. I want you guys to listen to this. Manufactured consent means it's not real. They manufacture that this is what people want. And the people who do it are the wealthy, and they use techniques that are sort of elaborated in the Powell memo. When I saw this piece yesterday by Joanne Reid, I said to myself, Joanne Reid has just joined the team, what I call the Ali Velshi team. Ali Velshi has been able to use the platform that would normally not allow them to say certain things in such a manner that they can do it without any severe repercussions. So I tell you what I want you to do is listen to Joyanne Reid about manufactured consent, how the black church, black folks are being used in it with Trump to make it seem like if Trump wins, it wouldn't be something that the plutocracy enforced, but supposedly some change in American attitude. And who best to have this change in American attitude than black folks and other folks who normally would not vote for Donald Trump. Folks that make it impossible for Donald Trump to win. So I want you to listen to this, and then we'll take it on the other side. It is what she did on this work here was nothing short of impressive.
Manufacturing consent, a concept introduced by Edward S. Herman and Noam Chomsky in their 1988 book on the political economy of the mass media. Here's a clip from the 1992 documentary of the same name.
The state loses the bludgeon when you can't control people by force, and when the voice of the people can be heard, you have this problem. It may make people so curious and so arrogant that they don't have the humility to submit to a civil rule, and therefore you have to control what people think.
It is the job of the media, our job, to not just tell you what happened, but to give you some context around what happened in a way that informs you and helps you make decisions in your busy life. But too often, what the media actually does is create a mass consensus around the preferences of the financial and moneyed elite to subtly make their preferences your preferences. This is especially true in selling wars and sometimes elections. The wealthiest Americans have a clear preference for the outcome. Donald Trump reinstalled as president. Mother Jones recently reported the following in an article about America's top donors heavily favoring Trump and the Republicans, which reflects something we've long known about rich conservatives, their disdain for taxation. Mother Jones reports that Donald Trump may have lost in the Manhattan court, where a jury convicted him of all 34 felony charges of falsifying business records. But, quote, one place he and his party appear to be winning in the race to snag major cash from the richest families in America. For all of Trump's supposed grassroots appeal, as of May 1st, less than 1/3 of contributions to his campaign committee for the 2024 election cycle had come from grassroots donors. That means people giving less than $200. According to Open Secrets, large contributors accounted for 69% of Trump's $121 million total, whereas President Biden's campaign committee, which took in $195 million, got 54% from large donors. More broadly, the lion's share of confirmed contributions from the biggest political givers, the top 100 families, have flowed to Republican candidates and groups. Then there's something called hard money. This is the money contributed directly to a specific candidate, and these are donations that the federal government caps. In the hard money category, Mother Jones reports that Republicans took in 27% more from the top 100 families than Democrats did. In dollar terms, that's about $86 million for the Republicans versus about $68 million for the Democrats. But if you include soft money, the unlimited donations that the Supreme Court made possible through their Citizens United ruling during and maybe in response to President Obama getting elected by a 10 million vote margin, it's not even close. Quoting Mother Jones again, Republicans raked in a whopping $508 million from the top 100, triple the Democrats' $169 million take. It's a lot of numbers and data, but it may leave you wondering, why would America's wealthiest families continue pouring money into a political party that has stripped itself of its dignity to fashion itself into a religious cult centered around a 78-year-old 37-count felon and adjudicated sexual abuser? Michael Mechanic of Mother Jones, who authored the piece that I'm quoting from, has a pretty good guess. Biden and the Dems have spooked America's richest with their multiple and largely unsuccessful efforts to close abusive loopholes and raise taxes on corporations and the upper crust. That includes efforts to tax the unrealized gains of the mega rich. The paper profits on appreciated investments that are currently only taxed when the assets are sold. In the meantime, Trump and the Republicans are fighting to extend their unpopular and ultimately disappointing 2017 tax cuts, a move the Congressional Budget Office calculates will cost the U.S. government $3.5 trillion with a T over 10 years. What does that have to do with manufacturing consent? No one seems to know who originated the quote, but it's been repeated by everyone from James Baldwin, who said he was quoting Malcolm X, to Dr. King, that the most segregated hour in American life is 11 a.m. on a Sunday. It's just a factual legacy of this nation's history with race and religion that there are predominantly white churches and there are black churches. But what do you think of when you think of a black church? Probably something like this. Now, you may even think of images such as these. But what you probably don't think of is this.
What a nice welcome. Thank you.
That is the reaction to Donald Trump at what nearly every major media outlet reported was his visit to a black church in Detroit, Michigan, one of the 10 blackest cities in America, with a population that's about 78% African American and a poverty rate topping 33%. In other words, it would be hard not to fill a Detroit church with black people. So now I want you to look with your eyes. Just look with your eyes again at this crowd. Is what you're seeing here, what you would write in a headline, is a black church? And yet, here was the headline in the New York Times: Trump, in pitch to black voters in Detroit, cast Biden as anti-black. And the Washington Post: Trump portrays rampant crime in speech at black church in Detroit. In the Associated Press: Trump blasts immigrants for taking jobs as he courts voters at a black church MAGA event in Detroit. The Detroit Free Press even ran a photo series online with the headline: Trump visits Detroit church to woo black voters. What they somehow forgot to show was how overwhelmingly white that crowd was, and also how many empty seats there were in that sanctuary. In fact, if you looked at the carefully selected images in their online story, you would probably guess the crowd inside that sanctuary was overwhelmingly black and pro-Trump, literally cheering for him and chanting his name. And you would be forgiven for believing that this reinforces what seems to be the new hot narrative, that it is black people, specifically black men, who are driving Trump back into the White House with their overwhelming and historically growing support. And the actual reality that you can see with your own eyes and know, if you peel back the layers just a little bit, is that Trump spoke to an overwhelmingly white crowd inside a large Detroit church that, yes, does indeed have a black pastor, but which merely served as a venue. And that the people who participated in the roundtable, like those in the audience at that church, were already Trump supporters, not some new historic black supporters of Trump. Trump was in Detroit to participate in something called the People's Convention, a weekend-long gathering arranged by Turning Point Action, a conservative grassroots group founded by activist Charlie Kirk. It would have been easy enough to ask some of the attendees at that roundtable if they came to that church from the convention. And while several of these stories note that Trump harped on crime as part of his presentation, doesn't it seem kind of ironic and pretty relevant that the guy saying that just recently got convicted of 34 felony counts in New York? I mean, Trump raised the crime rate in Detroit just by being there. And one of his new friends at that event, Kwame Kilpatrick, Detroit's former mayor, is just 4 years out of prison himself, where he was sentenced to 28 years for his role in a wide-ranging racketeering conspiracy that included fraud, extortion, and tax crimes. Kilpatrick extorted city vendors, rigged bids, and took kickbacks and bribes. He used funds from nonprofit civic organizations to line his pockets and those of his family, steering millions of dollars to himself and his friends as Detroit plunged deeper into poverty. Kilpatrick was released because Trump commuted his sentence in 2020. So, of course, now he's endorsed him. It's weird, right? How many of the black men endorsing Trump are formerly prominent and famous black men who have criminal records? Not like the criminal records this country has racked up for black men through things like the war on drugs. Nope. For crimes they committed after they were prominent and or rich. Kind of like Donald Trump. Also on hand as part of Trump's Blacks for Trump coalition, Black Republican Congressman John James, who represents an overwhelmingly white, affluent district in Macomb and Sterling Heights, Michigan, meaning not that district, whose congresswoman is Rashida Tlaib. Also, Detroit native and former Trump HUD Secretary Dr. Ben Carson, who hasn't lived in Detroit since he was a child, and more recently has lived in mansions in places like Virginia and Florida. The ever-present Trump apologist Byron Donalds, whose majority white district is also in Florida, and a claque of local Detroit rappers who, apologies, I confess, I've never heard of. The church where Trump held this town hall is called 180 Church. The pastor, Lorenzo Sewell, is a Detroit native who grew up in an abusive home, with his father going to prison when he was a teenager. His experience with the criminal justice system did not happen when he was already rich and famous. He became a drug dealer and gang member as a troubled kid the way it tragically happens for so many Americans in communities with high rates of poverty. But he had a conversion experience his senior year in high school in 1999, according to his church bio, and later became a pastor. Here he is, claiming Biden and Obama never visited the hood.
President Trump, I'm so humbled that you would be here. President Obama never came to the hood, so to speak, right? President Joe Biden, he went to the big NAACP dinner, but he never came to the hood. So thank you.
This is the part where I point out that President Obama came to Michigan 15 times as president, including Detroit. Pastor Sewell also claimed it's hard to find a black barber in Detroit for his Blasian kids, which honestly was weird. And in an interview on Fox after the roundtable, he quoted something you've probably never heard of called the Platinum Plan, a black wealth plan he claimed Donald Trump created, but which actually was the idea of rapper Ice Cube. So not a Trump plan at all. And I'll add this. It is ironic that Trump is attempting to court black voters in Detroit just 4 years after lying about black voters in Detroit and claiming their votes were inherently fraudulent. Michigan was one of the states whose votes Trump, Rudy Giuliani, and their little cabal tried to steal in their insurrection. The Attorney General in Michigan has charged 16 people with felonies for trying to steal the votes of black Michiganders from Detroit. So in making his pitch, I wonder if Donald reminded his new friends that he doesn't think their votes in a city where he won only about 5% of the votes should have counted the last time. Which brings me back to the question of manufacturing consent. We know based on the actual data, donations, the endorsements, and open statements of billionaires that it is the super rich and also Christian nationalists who want Trump back in power, not poor folks or black Americans. So why is all this energy being expended to try to pin a potential Trump return on these groups instead of on his real base? Because Trump has a big lie about black people too. And just like all of his lies, it aims to jeopardize democracy by making you think that he did more for black people than any president but Abraham Lincoln. We will unpack these lies.
We absolutely so. That was great. I mean, when I saw this piece from Joanna, I was like, oh my God, it's a long piece. How do I get it to about 10 minutes or so in such a manner, cut in spaces? So that was a long, hard job because it's much longer than this and it goes on further. But anyway, it's important. This piece shows great journalism. And the reason it shows great journalism is because it shows you something that is meant to be unseen, but that you act on. You act on something that's unseen. And what is unseen? Donald Trump making the push towards black men, poor people, etc., criminals. Notice this started way yonder when he pardoned many Democratic politicians that actually did some pretty bad things. Boyanovich from Illinois, when he did Kilpatrick, all these criminals. Notice he hangs around with a whole lot of criminals. He pardoned them for a reason. Okay, he thinks so little about black folks. He thinks that gives him cred, as if there's an equation between black and criminality. Now, but that is only the understory. The understory is then to get sufficient support, not necessarily majority support, but sufficient support from these folks that make it seem like his elevation to the presidency wasn't caused by the ones who really are the ones pushing his presidency. Look, many billionaires, Democratic and Republican alike, are supporting Donald Trump. We had one of the guy from I don't remember the group, Citigroup or one of these guys, Democrat. It's probably not Citigroup. It's one of the investment banking firms. Went ahead and said, maybe Trump isn't all that bad after all. But what they were saying is they don't like what a second Biden administration would look like, because he will be coming for something like, let me see again. Oh my God, he may actually come for the wealth tax, where we really tax wealth. You see, you average American citizens, your wealth is being taxed. Every time your house, you don't sell your house and then pay your tax on your house. You pay a wealth tax on your house every single year. But the stockholder, they don't. They only pay a tax on their wealth, which your home is your stock. Their stock, they only pay taxes on that. Oh, Again, when they sell it. And by the way, they pay less taxes than you because they pay an appreciation tax that is taxes less than the going tax base for the average American worker. So manufacturing consent is actually, and our Michael Rudnin gets it right. It requires the complicity of the media. That's why it is great to see people like Joyanne Reid, Ali Velshi, and others who go around the natural direction that our corporate media has, and they find a way to put the message out and still stay on air. And there's going to be, after she did that piece, I can guarantee you that many up there, many in the plutocracy, called up MSNBC and said, you better put some tabs on that girl. Again, I am speculating, but I know how these things work. And just like I know they do that when Ali Velshi puts out certain stories and others put out certain stories. But we got to thank those who use the platform at the time that they have that platform to inform Americans of the fraud that is occurring with the media. So there's that. Calling in today, we have Reid MCP, who is a great supporter of politics done right, a supporter of the rights of everybody. She sent me a message that I wanted her to explain why she sent this message. It's on the screen. I want to read the caption. It says, rotten potatoes and seaweed or even grass properly mixed afforded a very wholesome and nutritious food. All knew that Irishmen could live upon anything, and there was plenty grass in the field, though the potato crop should fail. That was the Duke of Cambridge, January 1846. Tell us about it.
Well, the other post says that there never was a famine. There was a genocide, which I wanted E2247 to hear. And people think, like, if America lost corn, would we all die? Would 1 million people die if you didn't have corn? No. So why did 1 million Irish people die when Spain, Italy, so many countries were sending shiploads of food, meat, and all kinds of food to Ireland to help us because we had a famine. And during then, yes, they did eat potatoes, but they ate other things. Well, the British took them away. They were the ones that controlled the actual poultry and meat. And they took it away. So they took the Irish, and like that picture shows you, why can't they eat grass? Grass is a nutrition, wholesome food. Meanwhile, they took all the shiploads of food that was coming and put it in a warehouse, and they took Irish people over to England, and they made them unload the food and gave them pennies. I mean, nothing. They didn't even give them food to eat. And they had to unload the food, and that was given to the British. It was not given back to the Irish. They killed them. That's why so many Irish left and came to this country, if they could, living in the bottom of a ship. Half of them died. But that's why they came here. So in relationship to what's going on in Israel and Palestine, it's genocide. And the British government, I think it was about 20 years ago, and I'm not going to have the numbers straight, but they were fined, I don't know if it was $5 billion or $25 million, a ridiculous amount of money for what they did to the Irish. But people think, oh, you just had a famine on potatoes. What's the big deal? That's how the British government controlled you. They separated us and controlled us, our country. And people think, oh, look at the royals. Aren't they handsome? Oh, look at the queen. Isn't she wonderful? No, they're not. They ruled everything back then, and they rule a lot now, but they lost a lot of their territories. Places became republic. They didn't want to be ruled by them anymore. They were torturous. They were horrible, horrible. I mean, look what that guy said. They can eat grass while you eat the food that Spain gave us to eat, that we had to unload for you. So it's very difficult when I see people not understanding what's going on with Palestine and the genocide that's going on. I'm not saying Israel as people are bad. We know, terrorism is wrong. You can be against terrorism and still be against the government that's doing genocide. They're doing the same thing blatantly. And no one's really talking about it. I have a very, very Jewish friend, And we had to stop talking because she said, I don't know what I'm talking about. And I said, okay, she said, we can agree to disagree. And I said, no, that's for coffee and ice cream colors. This is a fact, what's going on. I mean, even today, what is it? Netanyahu's war person quit the other day, and now he dismantled the entire war council, whatever they call these things. I mean, he knows. And the whole country, the whole world is against him. But getting back to Ireland, this happened to us, our people. And no one knows. They think it was just a famine. It was genocide. There was over 1 million people that died, and over 1 million or 2 million, I think, left. And almost 1 million people that were left sick and hungry. I mean, they almost got to the point that it didn't come to it, but they almost got to the point of eating their own. It was horrible. So that's why I wanted to send that to you, that people don't realize how bad this is, how bad it was for the Irish.
What I wanted to do, and why I wanted that in your words as well, is that history being told usually is told by the victor or the oppressor, the one who has the power to do so. And those who lived under it, they simply acquiesce to it. So we have to listen to what Netanyahu says about how bad the Palestinians are, when we know they're Palestinian terrorists and then they're the rest. The fact of the matter is, what he's effecting on Palestine right now is genocide in the name of Israel, not the Israeli. The Israeli people really are being taken into this action. But again, it's he who is evil, who is effecting the genocide. And for those of us who've lived through what some stronger country has been able to do to a weaker country, and then propagandize it as something that it isn't. You are empathetic. You can be empathetic enough with Palestine or Gaza and the West Bank. And I noticed that the parliament in Ireland is as well. They are very sympathetic towards Palestine, and there is a history there that many don't understand. Myself, being from Panama, go ahead, please.
I was going to say, way back when people don't. The IRA was labeled as terrorists incorrectly, but not really. I mean, some things were bad, but the IRA were named as terrorists. So now all of a sudden it's an international terrorist, and all they were doing was trying to fight the British Army that took over their country. I mean, the other terrorist group was the UDF, that was the Protestant people, and you could look them up in the phone book. But the IRA were outlawed and terrorists. So when you beat a person bad enough, they're either going to acquiesce or they're going to stand up and say, no, we're not doing this anymore. Enough. So back when the IRA was starting, the PLO was around, if people remember that. And the IRA and the PLO were very close in relationships with whatever ammunition and guns they were doing back and forth. That was a big thing. So the Irish have always stood up for Palestine. Unless you remember, it was always called Palestine, and they always got along, Jewish and the Palestine
Muslims,
people.
Yeah.
They always got along. Muslims. They always got along until that whole 1948 stuff started. But I cannot understand how a people who went through a Holocaust, well, not those people now, I mean, they're relatives, could do this to another person. That's why, the Irish don't get to be racist. They're not allowed to be, because we've gone through this stuff. We understand what goes on. It happened to us. It's never happened to this country. Could you think about just taking the northeast of the United States and saying, oh, France owns it now. Oh, you can't vote. You can't speak your language. You can't be whatever religion. You have to be this religion. You don't have jobs. You can't do this. You can't do that. And the rest of the country just sit by and be like, okay. That's what happened. And like my grandfather, he worked on the Titanic. He was a painter. And when he was born, his mother knew to give him a Protestant name, William. And they gave him a Protestant name so he would fit in. And he had to walk a big mile around in a circle so he could meet up with the other, what they call prods, to go to work on the Titanic. If you were found out that you were actually Catholic, you were burnt into that molten steel and put into that ship. My grandfather's diary says we all knew that ship was doomed. It was never going to make it anywhere. And anybody who worked on that ship was given a free ride to England on their first, before the voyage, the maiden voyage. And my grandfather wouldn't go. He was like, I'm not stepping foot on that thing. There's so many hundreds of Irish people into the hull that they found out that they were Catholic, put them into the steel, and right into the hull they went. People don't know these things. They listen to what the British government says, not what really happened. And it's happening in this country too. They're flipping like that guy you just had on, Tim Scott. Oh my God. But anyway, I digress. So I just wanted to tell you that what happened is happening in Palestine because they say it's Hamas. They can say what they want. It's not. They want them out. And this is how they're doing it.
You know, it is amazing because powers work the same no matter who it is. And that is one of the reasons why, as you can see, even the United States doesn't have the moral authority to really bring down Netanyahu. I mean, I always bring up the story about Panama and the amount of people that got killed because there's a disagreement between the American government and Manuel Antonio Noriega in Panama. Thousands of Panamanians had to lose their lives. Thousands. That just showed that these lives had no value to us. And it's the same thing that we find that is occurring in inside of Gaza. It's the same thing that happened ultimately in Ireland. It's the same thing that happens all over when these powers take command. And they're the ones who write the history. They're the ones who indoctrinate their people into not hearing truths. But thank you. I wanted you to come on and tell this story because, again, very few people know that really the potato famine was really a British genocide. So I'm scrolling through TikTok and this young lady pops up and she starts talking about, I'm sick and I'm in Thailand. And of course, all I have to hear is healthcare and another country, and I'm going to listen to the whole darn video. So I went ahead and I went ahead and listened to the video, and I picked it up, and I want you guys to hear what this young woman has to say, because there's nothing better than reality, how things really are. We can talk about healthcare in other places. We can tell Americans this is how it is there, but when somebody goes there unannounced, somebody just happens to get sick over there and then get to see what their system looks like. It's the biggest, it is the biggest, what's the word that I want to use? Positive about their system. It shows you how bad we are. So I want you to check this lady out and then we'll take it on the other side.
Okay, now something that I did not imagine, y'all, was coming to Thailand and getting sick. It's been about 3 days now. My symptoms started out as like chills. What else was going on, y'all? I was having the cold sweats. Bay also had some symptoms too, but hers didn't get as worse as mine did. It got to the point to where I was vomiting, y'all, and I haven't been able to keep any solid foods down, okay? Not even liquids, y'all. Last night, I just couldn't take it anymore. I had to go to the hospital, y'all. So I got up in the middle of the night. I went to the hospital. And you gotta know, going to the hospital in another country is scary. I mean, like, I don't know what it is. I don't know what to expect, you know? But once I got there, everything was okay, y'all. What I really want to say is America is a joke. I want to say that. It's a big joke. I'm actually kind of struggling making this video for y'all, but I really just want to get through the video and talk to y'all about it. So y'all, once I finally ended up making it to the doctor, I ended up getting checked in. They took me upstairs. They told me to go to the 4th floor because that's where the international patients would be seen. It totally makes sense to me to have different doctors. I guess there were international doctors, and then they had their medicinal Thai doctors, maybe like on the 1st floor or on another floor. So y'all, I ended up getting 3 tests ran. I got a COVID test ran. They also checked for like a strep throat or something like that. And they checked for one more thing. I have to look at the paper and see. But everything came back negative. So that was a plus. I'm actually trying to look at the paper and see what it was. And they also did a physical evaluation on me, okay? And for all of that, y'all, the total was 4,132 baht. Let me tell you something. Hold on. That's 113 USD. Back in the States, that would have been an easy $10,000, $8,000, probably a $20,000 medical bill. Then I probably would have had to go to the Walgreens and pay for my meds. Not no probably. I definitely would have had to go to a Walgreens or a CVS and pay for my meds. Now, y'all, they did end up prescribing me like 3 different medications. This is the hospital that I went to, Bangkok Hospital. I highly recommend them, y'all. I'll probably try to put in a little bit of footage after this of the hospital. So nice. I go there just to sleep. But look, y'all, okay, so I don't know if I can tell y'all the kind of medicine that they prescribe me. I don't know if that's, it is my HIPAA, right? But anyways, y'all, yeah. Now, like I say, in the States, that whole little procedure probably would have been almost 20 grand, y'all. I just paid $113. So if you ask me about the healthcare here in Thailand compared to the U.S., baby, I'd rather be sick in Thailand than in the States. I'm so serious. The only thing was just to be having my family here. But other than that, y'all, it's a go. It's a go. And also to mention, y'all, I know that y'all probably gonna ask, I don't have insurance. I didn't have health insurance when I came out here. If you guys would like to get health insurance, I would recommend it because you can get reimbursed for what you paid. Gratefully, it was just $113 because to some, that is an awful lot. But baby, when I seen that, I pulled that cord out so fast, he'll tap it, give me my meds, baby. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. But I'm sorry, y'all. I'll be back soon with the good content, y'all. Let me just finish recovering, okay? Your girl is like 99.999%. All right. Mwah!
I mean, I just love that young lady. I mean, I just love her energy, and I love what she had to say about healthcare. This is just from the heart, and knowing where you come from, and knowing that we are in a system that is a complete ripoff. Go to a country that cherishes humanity, right? You know, we like to make believe that we're this great country that believes in humanity and believes in civility and all of that. And when we hear a bombing in Thailand or a bombing somewhere, we make it seem like these people are so, different than us and that we have something special. And then you realize that they live longer. They get better health care. The masses over there get better health care. Our health care here is dependent on how rich you are. And she says it so sweet and plain. She paid $113 for what would have been, she said, $10,000 with all those tests that she gave, plus the physical. She's probably closer to 20 grand. My wife had a simple biopsy, and they billed her $27,000. It is highway robbery. Who are the evil ones? Who are the evil ones? But I tell you what, in just listening to a response here, we know Eric is in the house, and here is Eric makes 2 comments. The first comment he makes is, and I want to address this. I know I generally ignore when he makes or anyone makes trolling type messages or comments. But this one is an important comment because it says how some of us are programmed in our gullibility and indoctrination. His answer to this young lady telling a story that Americans need to hear, his answer is, so move. Well, you know what? She did. But that's not the point. The point is, when you saw that story, the next thing should be, we need to make America better. It shouldn't be move. It should have been a sensible comment like, let's make America better. Then another comment he makes, if you want stem cell treatment, go to Mexico. It is pretty effective treatment. Well, actually, guess what? You can get good stem cell treatment in Mexico at a very reduced price as well. Same chemicals and pieces coming from the United States, just that they don't rip off their people as bad as we do in the United States. So we like to make believe like we're an honorable country, we're a humane country, and guess what? Most Americans are. Most Americans are humane. Most Americans are good. Most Americans care about you. But those who are the maintainers of the capitalist system, those who are the ones that run the entire, I call them the titans of finance, not the free enterprisers, but the capitalists, those people, they don't give a damn about you. Hell, they don't even give a damn about their own. And when I say their own, I mean their own families, etc. Because they treat, for them, it's just about the mighty dollar and the system. So to this young lady, I want to tell her, you made my day, because your story, when many Americans hear your story, it reminds them that they are empowered to ask why. And we are also reminded by comments like that made by Eric, why it is so difficult for us to get that which we earned, that which we deserve, that which is humane. Because some of us are so indoctrinated that we cannot see that we are worth having a lot more, especially given what we produce for this country. Especially what we produce for this country. So, guys, to this young woman, thank you. I think a lot of folks are going to see that, and you are going to take it a little notch further for a lot of people who need to hear some truth. Support for this show, Politics Done Right, comes from politicsdoneright.com, publishers of How to Make America Utopia, Take Away the Economy from Those Who Rigged It, As I See It, Class Warfare, The Only Resort to Right-Wing Doom, It's Worth It, How to Talk to Your Right-Wing Relatives, Friends, and Neighbors, and other books written by Egberto, Willies.
Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILL